Right, so this here is my custom gaming PC that I just nabbed off CeX for about £13. And it was a while ago now, I can't remember the specifications, and as I've put the box down on the table, it's making almost like a crinkling noise. But I saw a full computer for £13 with a 5-year warranty and thought, I can't really lose. Because it's not like the boot fair, it's not like eBay. If it works, it's good. If it doesn't work, I get my money back. So let's get this open and find out what they've actually sent me. Chuck this down. I don't know how it's going to be packaged. I've never ordered a full computer from CeX. Well, it looks like CeX packaging. I don't know where they have boxes this large. A computer in here. It makes sense. It is actually a franchise. So there is a computer in there, and it is a custom one. But this looks to be, well, a ZooStorm computer. It says it down the bottom. We actually have a few indications. We got ZooStorm, so custom manufacturer, Core i3, DVD drive, USB 2. Someone's ripped off the operating system label. We've got a technical support number, I might call them. And moving around the back, it looks fine. I mean, it looks clean. There's a couple of bent bits. There's a graphics card. Does look noticeably more stained than the other DVI port. Actually, neither of them look particularly new, but that's fine. I've just noticed our first interesting thing. It's very odd that you can just about make out NVIDIA GeForce series Windows 10 through the fan vent. I mean, they don't really do much in the way of ventilation, but yeah, we've got to get this thing open because I'm a little bit curious on what it looks like inside. I mean, outside it looks pretty clean. So what's going on inside? 13 quid though. If it's a functional computer, you can't really argue because you get 5 years out of it. That's stuck. Okay, yeah, of course it can't just be normal. There is, in fact, a full box in here. This is for, I have no idea what this is for. Futuristic car on fire, and it says GeForce series, Windows 10, graphics by NVIDIA. Actual game screenshot right there. Dedicated NVIDIA GeForce GPU grass detail is clear and water shows realistic reflections and ripples. Oh, it's a gaming PC. Basic integrated graphics, you don't want those. Grass detail is fuzzy and water shows no ripples. And they're actually taking direct shots at the Intel i945. I think that thing is about 20 years old, so is that normal for NVIDIA? I'm not making it up. It genuinely is taking shots at Intel's integrated graphics by saying that their grass textures are blurry. What an insult. And there's nothing. But what's going on inside the PC? Well, there's the graphics card it's meant to be, a GeForce GT 430. It looks very OEM. And a Casa Alaska cooler, just standard OEM, on a really nicely cable managed setup. I know it's very basic and very OEM, but look how nicely that's all been done. I'm used to it being full of dirt and grime, but other than a box being shoved in there, which you never know, that could have been CeX, that could have been the previous owners, you never know. It's actually really clean. We've got a Western Digital Blue hard drive, FSP group power supply capable of delivering only 250 watts, but that should be fine for what's in here. And last of all, we got the RAM, so let's take a little look at the RAM sticks. 2 gigs of DDR3. And 4 gigs of DDR3, a Crucial and a SpecTech stick. So 6 gigs of RAM, 6 gigs is just about passable, it's better than 4. Yeah, I mean, it's basic. This looks like it was done for maybe a local office to the area. They probably just went to the PC shop and said, we need new computers. And they got built one of these. They probably wanted that for multi-monitor. I suppose we turn it on and we find out what it's running. I don't know where they're getting these boxes from though, because this looks downright hideous. It says Windows 10, so it's at least somewhat modern. I'm not going to put the side panel on just yet. We know it supports HDMI because, I mean, it's got a box in it telling it supports HDMI. So for £13, does it turn on? It should. It's actually from a real shop. Some nice hard drive noises. Blue light on the front. Straight on. ZooStorm. Maybe this is the way forward for budget builds. I don't know what generation this motherboard is. 13 quid, that's a pretty solid base to work from, and if it doesn't work, you get your money back. Maybe we'll have to do that. Maybe we'll actually see if we can build a full gaming PC at CeX and keep it under budget. But, right, we're back to the world of Windows 10 on a hard drive. It's taken a little minute to boot. It's also quite noisy. What is making the noise, is it? Oh, is it the graphics card? Yeah, the graphics card is really noisy. Oh yeah, they have to wipe it, don't they? Because it's CeX. It does actually have to come wiped. I wonder if it's even got drivers though. If they've wiped it that much, does it actually function? This metal is just very cheap. Wobbles. Right, we're about 10 minutes now to the just a moment screen. Still going. We actually still don't know what the full specifications are. I mean, it says Core i3 on the front, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. Right, I'm gonna go make a cup of tea and give it another 15 minutes and see if it actually does make it to Windows. But they did list this, I believe, as other OS. Maybe because they never made it through to Windows, and that way it becomes the next person's problem. Right, I'm gonna give it some time and then we'll see if it does miraculously bring itself back together. It has in fact actually booted. That took about 25 minutes, but it didn't ask me to do the setup. So someone's actually gone through and set this up. Okay, it's not awful. We've got the Core i3 3240, which is a very OEM i3. So that's some slightly overclocked Core i3 based on Ivy Bridge. So decent IPC, but down on cores. 6 gigs of RAM at some sort of speed, and no graphics drivers. Is there anything left on here? The name did pop up briefly. Judith. You know what? As far as Judith computers go, this is it. A ZooStorm computer where the hard drive light is just a constant red most of the time. What's it actually running in terms of operating system? Is it a new version of Windows 10? 19045. That's about 2021? So yeah, she was probably using this about 5 years ago, probably sat in a loft and traded in. The clock is correct. Right, it is one that's been upgraded because it is labelled Windows 7 on the C drive. She had some connected devices, so Judith was hip and probably had Windows connected to her phone at some point. Let's actually install some graphics drivers. We know it's a GT430 because it's got the label on it. Yes, Ethernet does work. It's now downloading every driver under the sun. It's not a gaming computer of sorts, but it probably can do some gaming for 13 quid. It's got enough RAM, it has a modern operating system, and it has a graphics card. And it's actually an 1155 board. I mean, a really clean 1155 system. I think this is going to be video 1 of 2. I think we're going to try and push this as far as it can go by itself, and then maybe we'll do a follow-up where we see if we can build a whole gaming PC from CeX. So this hard drive button, I'm going to keep that there because then you can keep an eye on it. This is just a constant red light, but this disk usage is just constant. That red light doesn't go away. I'm wondering if we turn off notifications, little old school trick to reduce desktop usage. If you go in System and turn off notifications, did you see that? It just plummets disk usage. I don't know what it is in Windows 10, but notifications have insane disk usage on hard drive as of newer versions of Windows 10. So by turning that off, I mean, it's still going to spike up at times, but it will actually drop away from 100% rather than just being that constant line. Go to the NVIDIA website. It's quick. It's quick for it's very quick for browsing the web, which is probably why it got traded in somewhat recently, because, yeah, it takes a long time to turn on. Once it's on and it's working, the only thing is, with all these tricks in place, trying to even load this driver file is just painful. This is why usually I swap to an SSD for testing, because look, we've got fine read speeds, we've got fine write speeds. That was 2 minutes waiting just to be able to click yes on I want to use the NVIDIA installer. I do just want to see quickly if it'll load Steam, given this is an older version of Windows 10, and we only have USB 2 ports. Great. As a computer, it actually works. I mean, this box was in there, which is stupid, but at the same time, it wasn't actually blocking any fans, it was just sat in there. So, for 13 quid, you could literally get a computer from CeX, you might need to install graphics drivers, you'll be using Judith's account, but it will work fine. I mean, it's going to be slow, the hard drive will be 100% utilization, you get a constant red light. This is fine. So we do have our full specs, the GT430 running at 700 MHz, the Core i3 OEM Special, our 6 gigs of RAM, which is actually running at 1600 MHz, only in single channel. I can't think it'll make too much of a difference. And it's recommending that we run Night Raid, which is actually a DirectX 12 test, so it is actually doing it. DirectX 12 gaming of sorts is running on our £13 CeX machine. I bet that GT430 is... no, it's not hot at all. We can probably overclock that. Even on the back where the core is, it's not getting particularly hot. So we should now actually get a score and see if anything's overheating. Actually did really relatively well for the type of hardware we're using. CPU's boosting up, GPU's boosting up. There's plenty of tuning that can be done. Go ahead and throw it up into a game and just get a rough idea of kind of what the gaming performance could be like. What was it the box said? Something about dedicated NVIDIA GPU grass detail is clear and water shows realistic reflections and ripples. Let's see what that actually means for real gaming. Yeah, 720p, normal settings, soft shadows, reflections are on high, put those back to normal. Nearly 30 frames per second? That's not actually terrible. It is hovering in and around 25 to 30 FPS. I mean, we've got to go look at some grass and some water real quick, because I think GTA 5, if I was using the Intel Graphics i945G, I don't think the water and the grass would look anywhere near as good. Yeah, look at that. Look at that grass. Doesn't look like it's fuzzy and has tons of detail. Thank you, NVIDIA. So how does water look? Dedicated NVIDIA GPU. The water shows realistic reflections and ripples. Yeah, I'd say so. I'd say that water looks pretty good. I will test Linux later, but it's already not going to be good. Despite looking like a boring office computer, it does actually have a decent motherboard. So I'm just going to go through and see if there's anything we can do for the processor. So if we put TDP at 90, sometimes it helps boost clocks. We're talking percentage points of increase. I have just shoved a little test SSD in there because we could use the hard drive. This video would take me about 3 times longer to make because as it stands, once it's running, and it's running a program on that hard drive, it's fine. And when you're actually browsing the web and doing bits like that, it'll work. But it would take about 5 minutes to boot up every time. Whereas now, I can plug in this SSD, it'll get devices ready, and we've just got a Windows 10 IoT install ready to go. So, look, there you go. That was quicker setting up a full Windows 10 install on the computer ready to go than it would have been if we just left the system as is. I'm going to take both of them out, give them a little bit of a clean, give them some fresh thermal paste, and then we can see if it makes any real difference. I believe I've actually got some fresh thermal paste, so I'm going to see if that's actually arrived in the post, and then we can start giving the system, I'd say, a clean. I mean, there was one bit of dust in it, which is from the processor fan, and it's actually just come out of the system. This is all of the dirt contained. I genuinely think buying these computers from CeX is not a bad idea. At least someone's had to test it and make sure it turns on, and if it's completely broken, well, they're not going to accept it as trade-in. So special day on budget builds when we get 2 unboxings. I just needed some bulk loads of thermal paste. So this is meant to be 30 grams of, well, just your standard tubes, your big old tubes of bulk thermal paste. So why don't we get this open? And it is not. This is Happy Capybara Lego. This isn't what I ordered. This has come from China. I can't really repaste the computer with this. It's the Master of Emotional Stability in the Animal Kingdom. That's drivers installed, by the way, in the background. I ordered a bulk load of thermal paste. The tracking number checks out. That's what they've sent me. Is there thermal paste in here? I never have any issues with AliExpress. No, there is no thermal paste. Well, there we go. I have Happy Capybara set. I think I've got some spare thermal paste. I don't know how you mix these up. Not that thermals seem like a problem, but I do want to see what the state of it is. I've got some spare thermal paste, so it should be fine. I'm going to run through TimeSpy real quick just to get some baseline scores for the CPU and the GPU, and then I'm going to give this a little bit of a refurb. World's easiest refurb. Literally just standard maintenance. Performance in TimeSpy, we probably are asking a little bit of the system, but at least it gives us something to work from. CPU performance though, this is what I mean. When that Core i3 is utilised, it's actually really rather decent. Yeah, we'll let that run through, we'll get a score, and then I'm going to change the thermal paste. Maybe even add thermal pads. Might let's do a bit of extra overclocking, we'll wait and see. Well, CeX, you've done it. Legendary. Yeah, it's keeping more stable boost with the TDP set, so we have helped it there. That is a good score for this type of system. But I'll turn this off, I'll change the thermal paste, maybe add some thermal pads, we'll go from there. And given those clips could be a little bit brittle, I don't want to touch it. So with the limited thermal paste I've got, we're going to do the graphics card, because that is seemingly our limit. Those cables? This graphics card, yeah, it's just an OEM special. So it's a Sunon fan, which looks like it's been added aftermarket almost. It looks like someone's glued that on. So, well, someone's already been and done some of the best bits, because this looks like it was originally a passive card. They've cut out the top of a Sunon fan shroud and crudely glued it on. Unless that's how they manufactured these. But, I mean, it does have a fan header. Oh yeah, there's not much thermal paste left on that. So, yeah, I mean, we've done the right idea repasting it. I might just cut out a quick strip of thermal pads to add on these Elpida DDR3 RAM chips. It's better than no cooling. Right, how much do we actually need? This will make very, very minor differences. So there we have it, our GT430 with upgraded cooling. These are always a pain to faff around with. Let's just take a quick look, see if it's made any difference to thermals. I don't think it will have off the bat, but we can always double check. The fan ramps up, but that is not getting hot whatsoever. Yeah, it's running about the same sort of thermals it was before, so under load it's running about 57 to 60 degrees. 850 is too much, so we can probably do about 800 on the core, which is a 100 megahertz increase, but memory we might actually be able to do a little bit more with. That's about all there is we can do. I mean, it's pretty much fine out of the box, so we've given the graphics card a slight clean, and we've managed to get a decent uplift on the memory and core. It's not much, these GT430s don't really budge, and there's nothing in the way of BIOS mods for voltages, because there's not even the hardware on it for it. You have to actually externally add bits on, which I don't really feel like doing. The processor is fine. The RAM, also fine. I mean, even the DVD drive, if I swing this round, even the DVD drive, yeah, that works. And you don't get that on a modern computer, but you get it on a £12 PC from CeX. I'm going to get a score at the end of this. It'll probably be slightly better than the one we got beforehand. We'll see if it's at least managing 30-ish FPS slightly better now, but that is all ready to go. Makes sense, it came from an actual shop, but this could be the answer to cheap computers. Just get one of these, use it until it doesn't do what you want anymore, and then start upgrading it. I've loaded up into a little bit of Counter-Strike, and it's running okay in places. It's getting anywhere from 20 to 60 frames per second. I think it's running in at 720p with mostly low settings, so it's not looking great. I'm struggling to be annoyed at it because it's not cost much. It's got a 5-year warranty. Yeah, it's just mostly in the spawn areas when there's lots of people. It does struggle a little bit, but then the frame rate does stabilize in around 40 to 50 FPS in Counter-Strike, so it's running okay. It's actually doing better than I expected, which is odd. I wasn't expecting to be this positive and optimistic about this system, but it's just working. I'm actually slightly impressed that CeX offers something like this that cheap, because we're going to push it as far as we can, find out what you actually can use it for. But I'm mostly seeing this as a great base to work from, because okay-ish power supply, good enough motherboard, it's all very clean. It's got a hard drive, so you've got your storage in there. You've got a graphics card that's not great, but it works. Graphics card that is running hot playing Counter-Strike, to be fair. I think this is probably the most utilized it's been. You've even got 6 gigs of RAM. It's not bad for the money, really, is it, already? But still, we'll do some benchmarking, and then we'll try and whack Linux on it or something, because people are going to ask. And it really was that simple. For this computer to just work, we took it out of the box, plugged it in, and provided you don't mind the hard drive, it will just launch up to Windows 10. Admittedly, there's a user account on there, but no files, so you can just go ahead and use that install. For the sake of simplicity today, I am using a test SSD, but otherwise, all of these specifications are unchanged. So just what are the specifications of our £13 CeX custom PC? Well, we have an Intel Core i3 OEM Special with the 3240, 2 cores, 4 threads based on Ivy Bridge, good IPC but down on cores, but it does at least have that single thread performance. The graphics card is a bit of a weird one because it's a GT430, but is also a very questionably looking one. It looks like one of those Chinese reproductions that got big in sort of the mid-2010s, and I imagine that when this PC was thrown together, it was just an easy option for dual monitor. Admittedly, the box does say that you'll be gaming on it, but it is also comparing itself to an iGPU, or chipset graphics, from 2005. You get 6GB of RAM, which I know a lot of people will scoff at, but 6GB does work a lot better than 4 does. Yes, it's in single channel and that's not ideal, but the limit of this system isn't really going to be that Core i3. Storage is in the form of a 500GB Western Digital hard drive that works a-okay. It's not clicking, it took a little second to spin up, but after that it's worked fine. It just struggles with, well, modern operating systems. You get a decent LG 1155 motherboard, you get an activated copy of Windows 10, you get an Alaska, however you want to say it, cooler, and you even get a 250 watt FSP power supply. So all in all, you get a rather competent entry-level system with a 5-year warranty for £13. And you're not going to be pranging about whether you get it out of the box and it turns on or it catches fire, because these things actually have to be tested. It's around this point I'd usually recap everything we've done up to this point, but because this computer's actually come from a franchise store,
Well, it has to go out the doors working, which with CeX in recent years tends to be the case. So all we've really had to do is turn this thing on, and I've tweaked it and tuned it a little bit, and by that I mean I've changed the thermal paste on the graphics card because it was completely done for, and I did add some thermal pads, in case you're wondering what kind of performance uplift this actually offers you to do something like this. Well, we went from a score of a total of 141 in 3D Mark's Time Spy up to a total score of 168. The processor pretty much didn't change throughout all of these benchmarks, but the graphics card actually did see a sizable uplift with even just a basic overclock, and then more so by providing cooling via the thermal pads. Do I recommend you do this to a GT 430? No, I just really wanted to do something with the system because it simply works that well out of the box. But what kind of era is this system ideal for? Well, across the synthetic testing, it is most balanced in DirectX 10, where you have excellent single-core performance from the i3, and the GT 430 has enough brute force to at least make it seem like a passable DirectX 10 card. As you get into the world of DirectX 11, we see this processor just take off. 2 cores with hyperthreading, decent boost clocks, that is sort of DirectX 11's bread and butter. It wants to run well on that. So we can see the processor remains pretty decent across DirectX 11, and the graphics card begins to falter as we move into Firestrike. Entering the modern world of DirectX 12, and we see that the system, it's doing okay across the board in terms of CPU and GPU and lighter titles with Night Raid, but by the time we get to anything remotely reminiscent of the modern day with Time Spy, we see the processor is just about holding up in there, but the graphics card, well, it's only scoring 145, which indicates that it's going to struggle to do anything. Now, it's pretty plain for us to see that this isn't a gaming system, but I have gone ahead and tried to do a few benchmarks on the PC, just to see sort of where the limits lie, because at the end of the day, these systems are coming up very cheap right now, because officially they don't support Windows 11. Yes, you could quite easily install it, but it means that a lot of resellers you'll find on eBay, or like in this example here, CeX, will have systems with these near exact specifications, and you can use them out of the box. So just what kind of performance do they offer? Now, as we've already seen, day-to-day performance is quick enough with a hard drive, provided you don't mind waiting for it to turn on and actually launch the application. When you're in there, works fine. But if you're moving to an SSD like I have, this system is more than quick enough for your day-to-day tasks. It's an Ivy Bridge i3 with decent IPC, it's got SATA 2 ports, and that GT 430, no, it's not exactly a spectacular card, but it does have competent final drivers that mean that most tasks or applications will launch without errors. But the thing is, that was already fairly obvious. We've seen that plenty of times before on the channel with these types of systems. The question is, if you do decide to go onto the CeX website, find the cheapest PC they're selling with probably similar specifications to this, just how good is it at gaming when you throw it up into the benchmarks? Starting things off, we have GTA 5 Legacy. Yes, you can technically get the Enhanced Edition running on Fermi graphics cards, but the amount of workarounds required, they also mean you need extra parts, so it will just be the Legacy version today. And with normal settings and soft shadows, with our overclock in place, we're able to maintain just over 30 FPS on average in a 720p resolution. Now, it was liable to drop beneath this when you're in heavy situations or scenarios, but still, we went from it being around a 25 to 30 FPS experience to generally over the 30 FPS mark, especially when you were in heavy movement, which would have previously brought us down to around 20 FPS. But with that overclock in place, well, we did stay closer to the 30 FPS mark. And what can I say, when that box was talking about this graphics card, well, that water, that grass, it might as well be photorealistic. I mean, it doesn't look pretty here, I'm going to be very honest, but you do at least get a 30 FPS experience in a very popular title out there today. Moving on to the world of GTA Online, and I already went into this sort of knowing that it's going to struggle. We don't have enough RAM for it given how bloated it's become, and we definitely do not have enough VRAM for how bloated it's become either. But still, with normal settings and soft shadows in that 720p resolution still, eventually our frame rate did stabilise, and it stabilised in and around 26 frames per second, with 1% lows down to 20 FPS. Now, I don't really want to call that playable, because it's not, but at the same time, if you were really desperate and this was your only option, which, you know, I've spoken to some people that are viewers of this channel, they would love to be able to play GTA at this sort of frame rate, because it's better than their Intel HD 2000 can manage it. So GTA will work, but the online version is struggling a bit. But what about all of those Counter-Strike professionals? Surely they're itching to get down to their local CEX store and buy the cheapest computer they've got in stock so they can actually enter into the competitive leagues or whatever it is they're actually doing. Well, with low settings in 480p, we did actually return 46 frames per second on average, with 1% lows down to 31 FPS, which actually was better than I was expecting. I was expecting single digits here. So Counter-Strike 2 is not exactly a playable experience, but it is one that is over 30 FPS, so if you really wanted to, you could do this. However, in simpler maps and scenarios, I loaded up into a competitive casual match over on Office, which was an online match, so the CPU wasn't having to deal with rendering all of the bots that were also on there. We returned 55 FPS on average, with 1% lows down to 36 FPS, which felt decently smooth, to be honest. The game works okay in 480p, the scaling's not too bad, so you can actually get away with Counter-Strike 2 in these simpler scenarios. It's very rare we see a scenario that's actually easier to run than the benchmark though, so keep in mind it will have to be older maps and simpler scenarios. However, if you take the exact same set of settings and move back to CSGO, we've already seen how it works in high definition, but what if you wanted to play in standard definition? Well, it was meant to be a competitive match, but there was only one other person on the server, so it was more of a 1v1, and we returned 102 FPS on average, with 1% lows down to 69 FPS. So actually quite a smooth and controllable experience. I was playing absolutely terribly, but at the same time, it did work okay. So CS2 will be okay, but CSGO, you probably could get away with some decent matches and maybe even up the resolution. Next up, we have City Skylines, which of course ran pretty well, but we did have to use low settings in 1024x768, plus the FPS boost mod, which is required because it fixes a bug in the game. There's nothing to do with problems with the system, it is a problem with the UI updating 10,000 times a second. I have to say we're using it, otherwise people get confused and launch the game and get 2 frames per second, but you need that mod if you're playing this game in 2026. And we returned 24 FPS on average, with 1% lows down to 15 FPS, which doesn't sound great, but at the same time, this was the best set of settings we could use that at least kept the UI visible, and it's a city builder, you can quite easily play it at these frame rates. It's worth noting that when you were zoomed out, you would get above 30 FPS, and in smaller cities and smaller maps, you could likely see over that 30 FPS figure more. At the same time, this is a rather basic system in a game that really does struggle. Being Unity-based though, the Core i3 wasn't struggling at all. 3 times speed up, no slowdown, so at least it has that going for it. For those older AAA titles, I've moved back to the original release of Skyrim, which we played with the default settings it selected, which was a mixture of low and medium settings in 720p. And to be fair, it ran much better than I was expecting. I was going to have to expect dropping down everything to low and maybe even dropping the resolution, but instead you get a very similar experience to the Xbox 360 really, returning 44 FPS on average with 1% lows down to 32 FPS. The frame times in the original release of Skyrim are a complete and utter disaster. So as much as those 1% lows are above 30 FPS, if you capped the frame rate at 30 FPS, increase the settings, you probably would have a better time. I mean, unless you're getting a locked 60 FPS in this game, the frame time graph looks like a block where they're all over the place. So yes, Skyrim will work fine. Really, I'd play it with a 30 FPS cap in place on this system so I could get some nicer settings and a smoother frame rate. But if you don't mind 44 FPS with some questionable 1% lows, it does run okay. Mount & Blade Bannerlord does seem like a remarkably new title to be trying to run on a system like this, but Bannerlord seems to always know how it wants to run and will run on virtually all systems we've ever tested. So despite being a new title, this has something called optimizations, which means that even on this £13 system from CEX, with the default settings of very low and a mixture of low settings in 480p, throughout the built-in benchmark that is very reminiscent of the late game, we returned 49 FPS on average, with 1% lows down to 36. I can't really argue with that because that was a smooth enough experience given that I wasn't actually expecting it to run well at all. I mean, this is on the verge of 60 FPS in places, and given that if you were playing this in the early to mid game, I don't doubt that with these settings you could actually see a full 60 frames per second. So for those newer, more optimized titles, yeah, they will run, but you're not going to be getting a high definition resolution. One of the most popular benchmark requests there always is, and given we're just sort of having a bit of fun with these benchmarks, is BeamNG. Now, running with very low settings in the jungle with a 480p resolution did prove slightly too much for the system, returning an average of 26 frames per second on average, with 1% lows down to 22 FPS. Honestly though, it was controllable. You couldn't add in the traffic or anything like that purely because the graphics card's VRAM, despite being overclocked, is still DDR3 and we only have 1GB of it. It fills up the VRAM pool and it becomes a much worse experience. So if you don't mind decent frame times in and around the mid-20s, you could get away with it, or you could just disregard those more intensive maps entirely, load up something like The Hill, and get near 60 frames per second with the same set of settings. So BeamNG is playable, it's all about monitoring your expectations, the maps you're using, and just going ahead with a limited experience. BeamNG will work fine in certain situations, but not the most intensive of them like we usually benchmark. I did want to give RimWorld a quick go because it's one of those simpler types of games that you probably would look at playing on a system like this. And to be fair, that GT430 was seeing utilization that seems far too high for what is a 2D Unity game. At the same time, despite version 1.6 increasing the amount of multi-threading in this, it does mean that it is still a Unity title, which means those first two cores are being hammered. Fortunately for us, we have an Ivy Bridge processor, and yes, it is a bit slow by the modern standards of the day and will slow down with larger maps and larger colonies, but generally it can still handle speed up, it doesn't feel sluggish, it will load in the world map and anything else you need it to relatively speedily, so the GT430 is able to give you a full HD resolution, and the Core i3 is enough to handle simulation at a decent speed. So for these simpler indie titles, you can get away with them quite well on a £13 CeX PC, and I think this is sort of the title you should be playing, rather than those newer titles that will run but will struggle. But finally, can it run Crysis? Well, actually, surprisingly, yes it can. With medium settings and low textures in 720p, we did return over 30 FPS on average, with 1% lows down to 27 FPS. Overall, actually a very stutter-free experience. But the point of Crysis here isn't so much to say, wow, this £13 CeX PC can play Crysis. Yes, that actually is quite an achievement, but not as much so as it would have been a few years ago. Still impressive, but it goes to show you, if this can play Crysis, then virtually all of those DirectX 10 and DirectX 9 titles will play perfectly fine on this PC. So I see Crysis as a bit of a over-encompassing benchmark. If you can play Crysis on this machine, you can play Fable, Knights of the Old Republic, Just Cause, probably Just Cause 2, a lot of those older titles that, you know, are associated with that era will play fine on a system like this, and not with the lowest settings, because if Crysis runs, well, it means you've got enough single-core performance to manage it, and you've got a graphics card that can handle something that is, well, not particularly well optimized and quite intensive. Evidently though, this is not actually a gaming machine. I mean, you can get away with doing a little bit on it, and managing GTA 5 at sort of Xbox 360 levels of resolution, probably worse looking settings, and probably a similar-ish frame rate in terms of the fluctuations. It's not great, but considering what we've paid, it is passable. For those simpler or older titles, think anything in and around the age of Skyrim or anything before Crysis, and it'll do it absolutely fine. But also those newer indie titles like RimWorld, they will actually work. So I don't think this is so much as... I want to be positive about this, because these aren't bad systems for the money, and for 13 quid, it can do a decent chunk of gaming. No, you're not going to be playing Cyberpunk. Most DirectX 12 titles will require a newer version than Fermi supports to actually launch, but they will actually at least load up on the system. As I've already said, day-to-day usage on the system is fine. This is just sort of extra bits you can do with the PC. For me personally, I think the main standout, Mount and Blade Bannerlord. Not so much because of the system, but because the fact the game will actually run on it and run it at playable frame rates. Yes, it's a 480p resolution, but when you paid so little for a system and you're going to get at least 5 years guaranteed out of it, how annoyed can you really be? Now, I'm not going to delve into how the PC runs because, as you've probably already gathered from the earlier live segment, when we ran it through a few benchmarks, it runs fine. I mean, you could argue that with the overclock, the graphics card is a tad toastier, but we're talking about maybe 2 or 3 degrees when running an overclock, and to be fair, You could get slightly, I mean, we're talking about probably 1 or 2 frames per second gain by adding the thermal pads and increasing the overclock there. So it's not really something you have to do. It's just something I did do to see if it would actually bring us any real improvement. But yeah, thermals wise, it runs fine. This Core i3, I mean, we increased the TDP on it. It increased stability slightly for a few extra points in physics tests. But other than that, it is still averaging in and around 20 to 30 watts of real-world usage. Ivy Bridge is ridiculously efficient for its age. In terms of the graphics card, that is also sipping at power. There's a reason this thing comes with a 250 watt FSP group power supply. Yes, it's got two 12 volt rails. Yes, it will deliver that reliably, but this system is hardly pushing 100 watts under full usage. It's actually remarkably power efficient given the age of it. So it stays cool, it's going to run for years, and I don't doubt thermals will never be a problem, because I've not even touched the thermal paste on the processor, because frankly, I haven't needed to, and I don't really want to bust the clips on the cooler. But more interestingly than this though, is people are going to say, how would a system like this perform if we loaded up into the world of Linux? So overall, I really like this little computer. No, it's not a gaming machine, no, it's not a powerhouse, but it is a simple system that works. It's clean, it's tidy, Windows performance, yes, it's sluggish on the hard drive, but when it's running on the SSD, it does fine. And this will run Windows 10, it'll run Windows 11, and of course, it will also run Linux. Now, I don't think Linux is really going to blow us away, but every time I don't test it, people ask why it wasn't. So we're going to turn this machine off, we're going to set it up running Linux, and we're going to see if it runs okay. Now, of course, the modern perception of Linux is that it will transform all of these low-end computers, but the reality is, this is an old Fermi display adapter, this is an older i3, even if we had a more modern graphics card that supported something like Vulkan, we will probably get worse performance than over on Windows because of translation layers. But still, for maybe general day-to-day usage, it could run okay. Now, on one of these drives, this one here, is a fully set up copy of Elementary OS, which is probably a good choice for something like this. It's not too hard to run, it's usually pretty adaptable, so should, once I turn this back on, just boot straight up to Linux. And we'll run a quick bit of Neofetch, we'll launch into Steam. I don't think there's going to be anything it'll actually be able to launch, because even the older OpenGL stuff, it's just so unhappy with its native ports on modern versions of Linux. Yeah, we will give it a go, because maybe as a media center, this makes more sense to be running Linux, and maybe if this was a machine for, say, grandparents or your parents or someone, they're not going to be doing anything that's Windows-centric, then yeah, Linux could be a good shout, because look how quick that was. We are already at the desktop. Actually, blisteringly quick. I wasn't expecting it to be that fast. Yeah, they're SATA 2 ports, so I suppose it makes sense. There we go, we can see right here, Elementary OS. It's running the 64-bit version. Uptime already is at 44 seconds. That's from a cold boot to a configured Elementary OS setup. We got the Core i3-3240, such a weird OEM unit, but oodles of single-core performance even today. And we have the GT430 fully recognised. Of course, RAM usage will be lower, so I'd imagine if we went to the internet and say we wanted to look for, I don't know, a BMW E39, seems to be our go-to test is I Google some sort of car that I'm looking at. It kind of goes without saying, we knew that it would run okay. Bloody hell, they've got expensive. I'd imagine YouTube will also work, so if we try and load Budget Builds Official on YouTube, slightly snappier than Windows, getting around, but then loading actually accelerated websites is a little bit slower because, once again, this GT430 is not having the best time. Oh no, it does get there eventually. I think it is, yeah, it is doing it entirely on the CPU. It's not the best. I'm sure there are workarounds you could use to be able to get hardware acceleration, but yeah, it's loading videos. So we'll go through, we'll see if it will load up Steam, maybe try and get into a game real quick. I don't think much will actually load on a system like this, but yeah, it runs Linux fine. It's nothing that we probably weren't already expecting. I'm just taking a little look through Steam to see what actually I remember as having a native port. For some reason, I thought Mountain Blade Warband did actually come with a native Linux port back in the day, so I'm going to download Mountain Blade Warband. I suppose it's a good sort of oldish game that would work fine over on Windows, so it should work okay here on Linux. We just have to sort of hope that it's going to use the older native port and not the newer version running through Proton, because of course Proton isn't going to work here because no Vulkan. Still, we'll let that download, give it a quick go and see if we can do any gaming over on Linux. Well, it's all done downloading now, and I've got a few bits that I remember definitely had native Linux ports. So we'll start with the most basic of these, which is Don't Starve, which I do remember running on a Ubuntu system back in the day. Why is it processing Vulkan shaders? Okay, starting off with Don't Starve, which apparently does launch. I mean, we'll have to put it into laptop mode, I'd imagine. This has probably had a lot of updates. Yeah, laptop mode. Okay, I wasn't expecting it to just start there. I thought we'd have to do a bit of tweaking around and bits and pieces, but just load up into, apparently have a Don't Starve game. This must be years old. See what kind of frame rate it gets. It's meant to be in 720p. I don't think the resolution scaling is working correctly, because this looks like full HD to me at the moment. That is ridiculously hot. All to be able to run Don't Starve at... right, well, I've got no keyboard controls at the moment for some reason, but, I mean, it's running in 1080p. I know it is a bit of a ridiculous test, but I wasn't actually expecting it to just straight up go in game. So yeah, Don't Starve here. One of the older, simpler titles. We're getting about 30 FPS. I mean, it's hovering between 24 and 36 frames per second, which is not actually too bad. And that was just with clicking play. I thought it was going to try and load Vulkan shaders and go from there. Oh, right, there's a lot of spiders. I really should play more Don't Starve. What a great game. Yep, that is seemingly perfect on the system. I mean, you're better off playing in a window, but yeah, that's working. What else? Maybe we try something a little bit more intensive. Half-Life 2, on the other hand, I've gone for the Steam Legacy version, which should support OpenGL. We have Play Half-Life 2 or blank option. When you click Play Half-Life 2, it'll try and process Vulkan shaders. You can let it do it for 5 minutes. I just have. You can click skip and it will just do the same thing. It just won't start. I do believe there's an OpenGL command. What was the OpenGL command? Yeah, I don't know what it is with Half-Life 2 on Linux with the native version. I'll try once more. Unfortunately, no dice on Half-Life 2. If anyone has any ideas of how to get it working, please do let me know, because I've tried so many of the workarounds so many times now for these older cards, and it'd be nice to have what used to be the epitome of Linux gaming actually working on here. But running the native version, with no Proton, running it forced OpenGL, nothing. So let's see if things are any better for Mount & Blade Warband. Honestly, given that Mount & Blade in both Warband and Bannerlord guise seems to work fine, I'm going to be very curious to see what it does. If this just works. I think it is actually launching. Yeah, okay, Mount & Blade Warband works on an ancient graphics card running on Linux. So there is some hope for Linux gaming. Just, it's not going to be as good as you want it to be, but we'll try a quick match real quick, see how it goes, and then we'll go from there. There's no resolution options, which is, yeah, that's completely normal. Okay, right, put yourself down to low then. If you're going to run in 1080p, it's really high quality text here in the Linux port. Is it using a different way of rendering font? The text is unbelievably crisp. Yeah, I mean, we've got no resolution controls. And it's running. You could probably tweak this down better. It's getting around 15 FPS. I'm more amazed that the Linux port for Mount & Blade Warband still runs perfectly in OpenGL, and it has unbelievably clear fonts. That's my biggest takeaway from this. Why is there no resolution control? You probably have to do it externally to the game. I wonder if you can window it? It's almost like it's running some sort of weird V-Sync. I mean, it's a very, very smooth frame rate for what it is. Very, very smooth frame times would be the correct way of saying it. But yeah, you can actually do more Linux gaming on this than I thought you'd be able to. It's going to be tricky. It's going to be based on whether developers still actually have native support for OpenGL on their titles. But if they do, yeah, even the NVIDIA graphics card in here isn't going to be your biggest problem. It's just going to work, provided you have something that will run on OpenGL. The frame times are close enough together that this is controllable. Would I recommend playing it like this? No, because you could just run Windows XP on this machine and probably play this in 1080p with higher settings. Not as clear fonts, but I'd be willing to make that trade-off. Linux, actually better than I thought it'd be, given that we were able to do a slight smidge of gaming. I mean, 2 games, but That's still more than I thought I'd be able to do, and it's decently speedy, so I'm glad we actually tested Linux there, because it goes to show the limitations of it on these PCs, but there are circumstances where it could actually work. So there we have it. That is what happens when you buy a £13 custom PC from CeX. You get a rather competent but basic computer that'll do all your day-to-day tasks fine, provided you don't mind whacking an SSD in there. It will do it on the hard drive, but if you're running Windows 10, it's going to be slightly slower. Linux or Windows 8 or Windows 7 would make a lot more sense, but really you want something that is still supported. And yeah, I think this is going to be video 1 of 2. It's why I just pushed the system as far as we could today in a more optimistic way, because I have future plans for this computer. And if you can find one of these, if you're looking for a system, I think CeX is the place people, we get all our components from there, but you can get these full systems. They don't come up all the time. It's probably once or twice a month you'll see one of these types of PCs listed, and they go fast, because you're getting a competence machine that is clean, it's quiet, it works okay, it's got decent specs, and it's got the 5-year warranty. So if it doesn't work, well, you just take it in store and they give you your money back. So you can't really lose out on this one. Anyway, I hope you've all enjoyed this video. For me personally, this has been lovely to make. It's been very, very easy because everything has actually worked, which is something that CeX has come a long way with in the last decade or so, is I find them more reliable than most actual stores. And their warranty policy works better than most real retailers. So if there's any problems with this, I've got a better warranty on this 13 quid computer than if I'd gone and bought a brand new one off Amazon, because they would argue and hassle and cause problems, whereas in CeX I know they'd take this thing straight back or diagnose it for me. Anyway, it's been a rather optimistic look back at this. I hope you've all enjoyed. Thank you very much for watching, and good night.